Hello, everyone. Welcome to the kickoff webinar for the 2017 National Alliance to End Homelessness's Rapid Rehousing for Youth Learning Community. As you can see from today's agenda, the webinar is just going to be jam-packed with lots of information. We'll go ahead and get started and welcome, housekeeping, introductions. I'm Mindy Mitchell. I'm a program and policy analyst at the National Alliance to End Homelessness, and my focus is youth homelessness. Just for housekeeping's sake, to begin with, all lines are muted except for the panelists when they are presenting or answering questions. You can enter questions at any time in the box on the lower right of your screen. There will be an Ask a Provider question, and those questions should specifically be targeted to the experienced youth rapid rehousing providers and relate to issues that they will be able to address. Okay. And we are really excited today to have with us Oliva, who is the, and I'm going to mess this up, I think, Deputy Assistant Director of the Office of Special Needs Assistance Programs at HUD, who's going to kick us off with a conversation about young people and rapid rehousing and just the work that HUD is doing. And also, our experienced provider panel includes, and I'm going to try not to miss anybody here, Q-BLOK from Pathfinders in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Jody Jackson. Oh, Jody, I'm missing the name of your, Jody Jackson. I'm just going to go down the list of names. Sorry, you all. John Lawler, Gabe Enriquez, Laura Poskachil, and Lynn Rothmeyer from Riverside, California. I think I got everybody that's on now. And let me just say, for those of you who were on the learning community last year, it's usually me, Mindy, and Jen Saunders from the National Alliance team who both work on these webinars. And today I am without Jen because we had some internet issues at the Alliance offices. So I'm actually trying to run this webinar on my own from home. So please do forgive any technology lags. Jen is usually the one who handles all the technology stuff. So just to ground us in the goals for the learning community this year, same as last year, it's to improve our knowledge and understanding of rapid rehousing as an effective model for ending youth homelessness, particularly based in the experiences of rapid rehousing for youth providers who have been doing this for a while and have lots of practice knowledge to share with the field. We want to increase our understanding of those practices and improve the systemic approach to rapid rehousing for youth. So we'll get started now with our conversation with Oliva. And again, we're so happy to have you. And I know that your time is really tight here in DC, so I wanted to go ahead and kick things off with you. Welcome to the Rapid Rehousing for Youth Learning Community. We're glad to have you. And Ann will probably have to leave us as soon as as this conversation is done, just because lots of other things going on, of course, as you all probably know, here in DC right now. So Ann, can you get us started with just some of the big things that HUD is working on right now in the youth homelessness space?
Yeah, sure. And again, I'm excited to be on the call today. You know, we feel like we have some real momentum here at the Department of Housing and Urban Development on youth homelessness in particular. And I know, you know, the biggest thing that we have going right now is the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, which a lot of people really think about that in terms of the 10 communities that I'll talk about in just a moment. But it's really an initiative, a larger initiative that has 4 parts to it. And the first part is research, and that is being done in conjunction. We provided funding to Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago, the Voices of Youth Count project, and sit on their steering committee to help them do original research and surveys, help us improve the point in time count for young people. So that's an exciting set of original research and literature review and all sorts of other things that are sort of in that package. So that's one part of the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project that's exciting. The second part is that we were provided funding through our appropriation in 2016 to do technical assistance specifically on the subject of youth homelessness. And so we have awarded technical assistance providers around the country with funding that will support both the grantees under the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project, but also the broader community who is working on youth homelessness. So they're doing things like developing materials, doing on-site technical assistance with communities, doing webinars and that sort of regular technical assistance, the suite of regular technical assistance that we do, but it is dedicated and set aside from our normal TA funding for this particular population. We also have the evaluation of all of the work that we're doing that will be running through our policy development and research shop here at HUD, which will allow us to really publish what we're learning from these various parts of the YHDP process. And then probably most important is the program dollars. $33 million was awarded in January to 10 communities who are using these funds to build systems of care that are designed to end youth homelessness in their communities. And this is incredibly exciting both for us here at HUD, but also for those communities that have this new resource to really implement something new and innovative. And because it's a demonstration, it also allows us to be more flexible than we normally could with our regular continuum of care dollars. And then I'll just mention a couple of other quick things. We are working with those technical assistance teams in each of the 10 sites. Each site has their own TA team that is working with them. And on each team, there is at least one young person with lived experience who is helping that community understand how to build these systems of care, what works for young people, and to ensure that young people, that we are doing real collaboration with young people, both here at the national level as well as at the local level. We're supporting TA, as I mentioned. We're supporting 100-day challenges across the country. We have a bunch of new materials that are going to be coming up. And then the last thing I'll just mention is that we're working with a unique group of youth interested, I guess, stakeholders, including Away Home America, Many, Chapin Hall, our own policy development and research shop, Org Code, and some others who are going to be helping us try to dive into the data that we have available on young people so far to help us to help inform any policy decisions that we're making going forward. So that's just, you know, a taste of what we're working on right now. But as you can see, we really feel like we have a lot of momentum in this space.
That's so awesome, and I definitely, you've been doing this work, of course, a lot longer than I have, but just in the 3 years since I've been at the Alliance and working on youth homelessness stuff, it's really been a sea change, and it was part of that momentum that that inspired me and Jen to start the learning community last year and to keep it going this year. So that's really great. Thank you for that overview. Let's move into now just talking about some specific rapid rehousing for youth stuff. Do you know just, can you give us funding amounts? I know the HUD funding for youth-specific rapid rehousing has really increased in the last couple of years.
Yeah, so it's actually, we do this analysis every year after we announce the competition awards, and when we looked at the youth data both in 2015 and 2016, we were really, really pleased with communities and how they're stepping up to serve young people who are experiencing homelessness. So between 2014 and 2016, we had a 272% increase in funding for rapid rehousing that is dedicated to young people up to age 24. So that's an increase of nearly $23 million nationwide.
Wow.
Yeah, they're big numbers. And in terms of the number of young people who are served in the Continuum of Care program, in that same period, 2014 to 2016, we increased across all of our programs that serve young people, by a little bit more than 15,000 young people being served nationwide in all of our programs. And in rapid rehousing specifically, we are now serving through the 2016 awards nearly 18,000 young people in rapid rehousing dedicated for youth.
Oh my God, that's awesome, and it's giving me chills right now, and it's making me even more excited for the learning community this year. That's great. Can you talk a little bit, Anne, about why youth rapid rehousing?
Yeah, I think this is something that is really, from our perspective, pretty organic. For the last several years, most of you who are on the phone know Norm Suchar, who is my director of the Office of Special Needs Assistance Programs, or the Homeless Office. And over the last several years, Norm has convened youth listening sessions. And we've also convened some more, other people have convened youth listening sessions that we've been able to participate in, including the National Alliance, including the True Colors Fund folks, and several other sort of partners that we've been working with. And I would say consistently in those listening sessions, what I've heard from young people and what my team has heard from young people is that they want choice. They don't want to, and it's really why we're taking the systemic approach, right, to ending youth homelessness. There's a lot of different needs out there, and we've heard from young people that they want to be able to find the type of program that best suits their needs and where they are in their life. And rapid rehousing is particularly suited to that because it's so flexible, and it's flexible by design, even though that doesn't totally make sense. But you see what I'm saying. It's flexible by design, so you can change the amount of the subsidy provided, for example, or you can change the amount of services or the types of services based on the needs of a specific individual, instead of trying to put an individual into a program that's already designed. But, you know, again, this is really about what young people are telling us, and what they want is choice, just like anybody else.
Awesome. Thank you. That's also what I hear working a lot with the youth on the National Youth Forum for Homelessness. We have lots of conversations about different housing models and what they would have wanted in their experiences. So since folks have been doing this for a while now, especially, you know, the more experienced youth rapid rehousing for youth providers who make up our provider panel, can you talk just a little bit about what you all at HUD have been hearing from providers who are implementing youth rapid rehousing, just maybe some common elements that you hear from HUD? I know there's no hard data on that yet, but I think we all kind of hear similar themes.
Yeah, I would say, well, the first thing I want to just mention that I forgot to mention a couple of minutes ago is that we also had young people paid to be part of the panel that selected the 10 communities that that we funded. And I don't know if people out there in the country know that, but I think it's a really important aspect, because those 10 communities are responsive not just to the NOFA that HUD put out, but they're responsive to what the young people who are on the panel thought that would work in terms of a systemic approach to ending youth homelessness. So I think that's just another piece of that that's important. And then, like, from the practitioner level, we're trying really hard to learn in as real time as we can from people who are implementing rapid rehousing for youth on the ground. And I would say there's a couple of things that I've heard. That you can't just copy a rapid rehousing project that's for families or adults and think that it's going to work for young people who are experiencing homelessness. As I said earlier, rapid rehousing by design, by its nature, is meant to be a flexible intervention. So, for example, the subsidies, again, may need to be longer, whereas for families or individuals in a community, the average subsidy may be 3 months or 4 months or 5 months. For young people, it might need to go longer than that. So bridging that space between sort of very temporary and permanent supportive housing, which is sort of, you know, in theory forever. Landlord engagement, I think, is something that's different, and that's just because landlords generally tend to be not just concerned about or not necessarily engaged in homeless services work, but young people experience, I don't know exactly the word that I'm looking for, but it's hard for them to engage with landlords, and landlords can be hard to work with in this environment. So engage landlords and really having them understand what the supports are and how these young people are being supported in housing, I think is really important. That's a theme that we've picked up. And then the last thing that I would say is that you know, the sort of housing first orientation also looks a little bit different in this context. You can have a housing first orientation for young people in rapid rehousing. You just have to make sure that the different types of services, you know, are tailored to the needs of each individual young person that we're serving through this particular housing intervention. You know, and you can do those services in any of the housing interventions that we fund, whether it's transitional housing or permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing. It really, again, goes back to what the needs of the individual young person are and what their goals are and how they want to move forward in their life. So those are the kind of big ticket items that I've been hearing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's consistently kind of the big things that I hear too, and I think we'll hear from all of the providers on the panel that it's kind of those same issues that become part of like really making a good rapid rehousing for youth program work well is kind of embracing those themes and learning how to make them work.
And,
okay, I know. Go ahead.
Can I just add one more thing to that?
Sure.
You know, in the last listening session that we did at the National Alliance Conference in February, I actually began to change the terminology that I use around our work with young people based on their feedback. And I found this to be moving and important. And that is, you can't implement a rapid rehousing or really a systemic approach to ending youth homelessness unless you collaborate with young people in your community.
Yeah.
And something that was a criteria for funding for the youth demo, and we're going to continue to push on that pretty hard with our communities across the board. So if you were, you know, thinking of developing a new rapid rehousing project for youth, you might want to ask young people what they think works.
Yes, totally agree, and I think all the providers will sign on for that one too. And I know you need to go, and so just do you have some final words of encouragement for folks as we kick off this year's Rapid Rehousing for Youth Learning Community?
Yeah, I just, I want to thank everybody who's on the phone and who is doing this work across the country. I personally think that this is groundbreaking stuff that we're doing, and that the kind of momentum that we have, not just here at HUD, but with all of our partners, with the National Alliance, with communities that are really embracing new and different ways of serving young people, this included. I'm so grateful for all of the work that's happening, and especially for opportunities to learn from each other, because I think that we're learning from you all the same that you all are learning from each other. So I just would want to say thank you to all of you, and to please let us know at HUD if there's anything that we can do to support, or if you have questions, you can go onto the HUD Exchange and ask for technical assistance. We do have TA for youth available, or just ask general questions around how we serve young people, and we'll be happy to answer them. But you know, most importantly, thank you to everybody who's doing this hard work. It's incredibly important, and I'm excited to be part of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anne, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. I'm really excited about the work, and we all look forward to continuing to partner with you as we move forward this year. Thanks, Anne.
Yep, thanks.
Okay, great. Again, forgive me for the lag here. I'm doing this without my trusty sidekick, Jen. And we are going to Just talk a little bit to talk about some of the goals for participating in the learning community. We got a lot of feedback last year from participants, and this year we went in and talked to the more experienced providers about maybe if we want to think about for this year's learning community doing deeper dives on topics, what those might be. And you can see here just kind of some things that folks said either they were interested in learning more about or that they thought we should focus on in the community. And at the end of this webinar, you'll all be seeing my contact information, Jen's contact information. If you have thoughts or suggestions about what you think is most important to focus on in the learning community, please do let us know that too. Your input really shapes what this learning community is going to look like, because it is your community, and we want it to be able to make sure that all of you are able to do the best rapid rehousing for youth programs possible. So I just wanted to get started. Again, I think a lot of you are at this place, but there's also a lot of new folks, as Ann talked about. There's been a lot of new funding for youth rapid rehousing. So there are folks who have been doing this for a long time. There are folks who are just getting started on the rapid rehousing for youth journey. And so we'll just do a really quick overview and then get to Julie's presentation about her individual program. So again, rapid rehousing is about finding housing quickly, helping people to pay for housing in the short term, and also being flexible enough to go longer term if clients need it. And as Ann mentioned, and as you will hear from providers, a consistent theme about rapid rehousing for youth is that assistance will take a little bit longer than on average than it does for older folks. And it's helping families and youth and individuals stay in housing, and that's by connecting them with services that they need in the community. So what is rapid rehousing? It's a permanent housing intervention. That doesn't mean that someone stays in that particular house for the rest of his or her life, but it's a permanent housing, and that it's your own lease, it's your housing. And it's designed to help people quickly exit homelessness, to get back into housing in the community and not become homeless again. The core components of a rapid rehousing program are housing identification, move-in and rental assistance, and case management and services. And each of those core components is equally important. The rapid rehousing principles, standards, philosophies that are included in this presentation come from the Alliance's Rapid Rehousing Performance Benchmarks and Program Standards document, which we have available on our website. And they're based on what is currently considered promising and best practices by the Alliance, the VA, HUD, the USICH, APT Associates, and other federal technical assistance providers, and high-performing rapid rehousing providers, including youth rapid rehousing providers. So as you can see here, programs that are doing rapid rehousing should be coordinating and participating fully within the broader homelessness system so that you're engaging as many households as possible, because this is a systemic intervention. It's about flowing people out of homelessness quickly so that you're able to serve more people effectively. It's an intervention that's designed for and flexible enough to serve anyone that's not able to exit homelessness on their own, including young people. Programs that are doing rapid rehousing shouldn't be screening out households based on scores or criteria that have been assumed, but actually aren't shown to predict successful outcomes, such as minimum income, employment, criminal history, whether or not someone's motivated to do the work. And in rapid rehousing, participants have all the rights and responsibilities of tenancy, and that's in a standard lease agreement. So now just quickly, the core components, and then we'll have Julie Bach from Pathfinders tell you about how those core components work in practice in the Pathfinders program. The core components of rapid rehousing were developed in collaboration with and are endorsed by the National Alliance in Homelessness, USICH, HUD, and the Department of Veterans Affairs. So there are three core components of rapid rehousing: housing identification, rent and move-in assistance, and rapid rehousing case management and services. So while a rapid rehousing program must have all 3 core components available, it's not required that a single entity provide all 3 of those, or even that a household use all 3 of them. That's what we're talking about when we say rapid rehousing is a flexible intervention, and what you're doing for the client is based on what the client needs. A key element of rapid rehousing, as Ann talked about, is the housing first philosophy, which offers housing without preconditions, such as employment or income or criminal history, lack of, or sobriety. So the first core component is housing identification, and the goal of that is to find housing for program participants quickly. Activities under this core component include recruiting landlords with units in the community and neighborhoods where program participants want to live. It also includes negotiating with landlords to help those program participants access housing. The more partnerships with landlords that a program has developed, the more opportunities program participants have to rapidly get into permanent housing. And then as landlords experience the benefits of a partnership with rapid rehousing programs, they may actually end up giving preference to program participants, or even be willing to occasionally consider some reductions in rent, or let an occasional late payment go, or help people maybe transfer leases if a particular placement is not working out for a young person. Other activities in this core component include addressing potential barriers to landlord participation, such as concern about the short-term nature of rental assistance, or tenant qualifications, which you'll hear about from the other providers. And as you can see here, these are just a couple of the principles in this core component based on the Alliance's benchmarks and standards. And here are just some, over the course of providers doing rapid rehousing for a while, just some basic incentives for landlords participating in rapid rehousing programs. And you'll hear from our providers too, like maybe you come up with some enhanced incentives if landlords have hesitancy about working with young people. And excuse me, just a minute, folks. Again, I'm doing this on my own, so I'm trying to get, I think my colleague Sharon is on and will be able to help me gather questions. Thanks, Sharon. The second core component of rapid rehousing is rent and move-in assistance. The amount and duration of financial assistance varies, and as we talked about earlier, it's usually a little longer on average for young people. The key is that you provide the assistance necessary for households to move quickly out of homelessness and to stabilize in that permanent housing. Some common types of assistance in rapid rehousing financial assistance include move-in costs, security deposits, rental payments, utility assistance. And again, here's some principles about this particular core component. They should be flexible and tailored to the varying and changing needs of the, in this case, the young person. And part of rapid rehousing being a systemic solution and being that flexible is that you maximize the number of households that you're able to serve by doing what's called progressive engagement. And that's one of the things we'll talk about more as we move forward in the learning community this year. Again, here are some standards that are related to this core component of rapid rehousing. And we are going to move through this quickly because I do want to get through our provider presentation. So some things to think about with this particular core component is that our people that we serve are really resilient, and some people have a lot of skills that they have honed in their experiences of being homeless, and they are able to succeed in these programs. And you'll hear from the providers, experienced providers, about how they make that happen. Rent and move-in assistance is short-term. This is not a permanent housing subsidy. And we know, because resources are really scarce, especially in this political climate, that we may not be able to rely on clients getting a permanent subsidy at the end. So we engage in progressive engagement. And this is that progressive approach. Again, this will be something that we talk about more in detail over the course of the learning community. The final core component of rapid rehousing is really, really important for young people. It's case management and services. These are provided both before and after a household moves into permanent housing. These services are an essential component of rapid rehousing. What I've heard a lot of youth rapid rehousing providers say over the past few years is, for young people, housing first shouldn't be housing only. It shouldn't be for anybody, but it's especially important for young people that housing first is also about these services, and rapid rehousing includes this core component that's equally as important. These services and case management have to be guided by the unique wants and needs of the young people experiencing homelessness. One of the most important in rapid rehousing case management is helping young people negotiate a manageable lease agreement with landlords, helping young people understand their rights and responsibilities as tenants. It's also about connecting clients with other community-based services so that when rapid rehousing assistance does end, young people are able to maintain stability in their housing. Again, here are just a few of the standards from the Alliance of Standards and Benchmarks about rapid rehousing. Finally, as I said, a really important case management role in rapid rehousing is helping the client connect with community and mainstream services that will impact their long-term goals. And this can include things like food pantries, assistance with other bills, financial counseling, connections to faith communities if young people are interested in that, vocational training, employment and education, really, really important for young people. One of the differences in this kind of case management approach versus a traditional one is that the case manager is kind of a broker who helps the client connect with resources in the community. So just to recap, in rapid rehousing, the focus is on barriers to accessing housing, especially landlord screening barriers, financial barriers, behaviors, circumstances that might lead to a violation of the lease or an ability to pay rent. And it's focused on consumer choice and letting the client guide the process. It's not just a program intervention, it's a critical systems intervention. And when people are in housing, they are not homeless. We're helping young people in this case find housing fast, pay for their housing in the short or medium term, depending on how long they need assistance, and connecting them with community supports that will help them stay in housing. So now we have, if I can figure out my technology, Julie, I think I unmuted you. Are you with us?
You did unmute me. That's wonderful. Yay! You're doing better than I would be.
We all need a Jen in our lives to help us with this technology stuff. So we're super happy to have one of the very first more experienced youth rapid rehousing providers that I came across just a few years ago when I was trying to figure out who was doing this innovative thing. Is Pathfinders in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So we're happy to have Julie do a provider presentation for us to kick off this year's learning community, and then she'll be joining a lot of other awesome experienced providers to have a provider Q&A. So Julie, take it away. Tell me when to forward slide.
Go right ahead and forward. Just in terms of, you've teed it up really well in terms of what rapid rehousing basics are, but I really want to focus and highlight a couple of things that I think is challenging. Getting people into housing within 30 days is a challenge depending upon what your housing stock availability is. Milwaukee has some unique challenges of not a lot of it and having really poor housing stock, so we have faced that issue, as well as in terms of the 3 primary components as identified by HUD, we have funding for housing identification and let me back up. We have no money and no resourcing of housing identification. So we sort of do that rolled into our case management services, and that's really through our landlord relationships, because for us, all of our young adult supportive housing is relationship, 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 both with our young people and in terms of good relationships with key landlords who are willing to undertake this journey with us, and that has been essential for our success. We do have money for rent, but we do not have money for moving assistance. We don't have that resource. So we get real creative in trying to figure out how to move people in and then have them have an apartment that is more than, frankly, a sleeping bag on a floor. So that has required lots of creativity and lots of community networking in terms of availability to get basics: a bed, a futon, a table, chairs, a lamp. Yeah, usually we have been able to get good response, frankly, from our donors at Pathfinders to put together the smaller things, pots, pans, silverware, those kinds of things, sheets, towels. But those bigger furniture issues are obviously a space consideration. We don't have a warehouse. And then moving them around is we don't have a moving truck. So those are things to keep in mind of how can you use your networks to do that, because the system really is challenged. If you can give somebody assistance and you can try to rapidly rehouse them, but if you don't give them an actual home, you're not really doing what you're trying to do. And our case management services are really focusing on age and development appropriateness. We also have a mentoring program which sort of falls under the case management services, and those are community volunteers who are actually matched with our young people to provide another way of providing support that is not focused and not directly associated with their, quote, housing program, unquote. And we expect and hope and oftentimes see those relationships being very independent. The mentors can be advocates as well as other surrogate parental figures with our young people, but because of their independence, those relationships last much longer than Pathfinder's rental relationships. So that's of benefit to our young people. Next slide. When looking at housing first for young people, the big point is choice and self-determination for the young people, understanding that youth are our allies and in fact are essential to the process. I hark back to what Anne Olivia said, and what Pathfinder says is you don't talk about us without us, and that really is seeing youth as assets, incorporating them into all areas of the process, including giving them, whenever able to be done and available, a choice of housing options within, frankly, the budget that you're working with. So young people really are incorporated into the entire program. They don't have any barriers to get into the program other than what our fiscal resources will allow us to do. And they really drive the program. They drive what they want. They drive what their goals are. And then they drive their interaction with social and community while we are recruiting people from the social area and the community to be able to interact with them and provide them with extra support. So we liken it to weaving a web to support our young people. Next slide. So what we really see as the key ingredients for success is saying that it's individualized, that it's one size fits all, and that engagement and relationship is the key. It's in fact our job to convince and to support the young person in working with us, not the other way around, where they have to fit into the box that we create for them. So that means there's a lot of flexibility in terms of time limits and developmental need. We're really helping young people to develop into mature adults, so there's a lot of need to develop skills and critical thinking, addressing their mental and physical health issues, and taking into account what responsibility they are capable of achieving with their present skill set, and where do we think they can go, and where do they want to go, and what do they want to achieve. And sometimes that's a bit of a conversation about a young person who may have severe mental health issues, severe physical or aorta issues, and their main goal is to get employed. And we can kind of see how that road may have a lot of bumps on it if they haven't dealt with their trauma, the issues around their mental health, that they're not going to be able to stay employed. But we have actually created what we call Employment First. It's our Pathways to Employment program that really addresses that based on really what we saw our supported housing young people needing. So the takeaway is one size really does not fit all. Next slide. So in terms of our initial, and this is really amazing, I get to say this, our initial rapid rehousing program is Q-BLOK. Q-BLOK doesn't stand for anything, but what it was designed as was a LGBTQ plus and allies transitional housing program, which quickly moved to a rapid rehousing model. And what we did is, in the planning that was 2 years, where we surveyed and we focus grouped and we did a community evaluation of what's going on for LGBT young people in our community, is that we saw that young people were twice as likely to be homeless. They had twice as many issues with mental health. They had higher rates of suicidality, and they were served much less in the traditional adult system. And so what we knew we had to do is we had to create something with our young people in mind that was developmentally appropriate. So we created Q-BLOK. And so what we really focused on is all that planning, and it told us so much about what we needed. We've used Q-BLOK, frankly, as an internal model for, we now have a Housing First program, and starting Monday, literally 4 days ago, we have our PAVS program, which both are within our supported housing division right now, which is amazing. We have really expanded this because our young people need it, and they've told us they needed it. We focus on having things be evidence-based, but really, again, grounded in a needs assessment that is individualized to each young person. Our partnership is with primarily Jamila, which is one of the landlords in town, and we spend a lot of time with them, up to and including training them in trauma-informed care, so that they have a real strong understanding of where our young people are coming from. And so then the support really for our young people who are in Q-BLOK comes from our landlords, as well as our mentor and our intensive case management, as well as what I talked about, our employment first approach, where if you need a house, we give you a house within fiscal means. If you need employment, we're going to frankly give you a job that is supported internal for the first steps, but then we are working with employers in the same model that we've used with our housing to have supported employment, because that's how young people are going to be able to maintain their housing. Next slide, please. So what we learned is don't assume, and that's sort of that old joke about putting the slash marks in between certain letters of that word. But don't assume you know what you're doing, even if someone says, or even if a university says it's best practice and it's evidence-based. You really have to design, implement, evaluate, and repeat. because you're always having to tweak things. Nothing is ever static in life or the world, and so you have to respond to what your young people and, frankly, the community needs you to do as a program. Steal liberally from other people. You do not have to do this on your own. There are lots of models that can work in your community, and so find out what other people are doing and, frankly, try out what they're doing to see if it works in your community, or if that's a place that you can start. See what the young people in your community think, and if they think that that's something that's appealing to them. And then make sure you understand your COC funders requirements and all of HUD's rules. So figure out where your money is coming from and what the requirements and or strings are attached to that money. And be really, really clear, because some of this, the nomenclature and the language used in a lot of folks who, whether you're working with HUD or you're working with runaway and homeless youth funding, the words change, the expectations change, and that can bite you in the butt if you're not careful. So a cautionary statement about making sure you're understanding what your funders are requiring. They really want you to succeed, so simply don't assume you know what they're talking about either. Ask them. Next slide. That's who I am. That's how you can contact me. The best way that we can serve our young people is to provide them with lots of great service, and I'm here to share whatever I can with you. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julie. And just so everybody knows, Julie was a last-minute fill-in on this one. We didn't have the person who was going to do it ended up having an appointment. So thank you, Julie, for always being there. And it's not just Julie Bach and the awesome Pathfinders. We have just a ton of experienced rapid housing for youth providers who we're thrilled to have as anchoring this learning community. Got us through the first one last year as we kind of didn't know what we're doing, and helping us getting started this year. And they're all here on the panel today, and I am going to try to list everybody with correct organizations now. I met Julie already. We have Kate Manriquez from the YMCA in Seattle. Barry Goldard, sorry Barry, I knew I was going to screw that up, from Safe Place for Youth in California. Beth Holger-Ambrose from The Link in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Jody Jackson is with Heartland Family Services, and I don't know how I forgot that. John Lawler with The Connection in Hartford, Connecticut. Laura Poskachil in LifeWorks in Austin, Texas. Great new rehousing program. And, of course, the wonderful Lynn Brockmeyer from, Lynn, I'm going to mess this up too, Riverside Community Health, Mental Health, County Mental Health. I'm going to try to unmute everybody and see if I accomplished that or not. I don't think I did. So hang on, everyone. Let me get everyone unmuted. You all unmute. Okay. All right, I'm having to do this individually because I can't figure out how to do it as a group. Give me just a second. And Lynn, it looks like I actually don't have you on audio. So I sent a pin, and hopefully we will be able to hear from Lynn, and I'll look to see that you come back on. But I think I have everyone else unmuted now. So we will go ahead and get started with our Ask a Provider Q&A. We've had lots of great questions so far, and we'll go ahead and just dive in. And since we have so many of you experienced providers, I'm going to try to space it out, who I throw questions to, and if it's a question that you don't feel like it's one that you want to address, you can pass to another of the colleagues. So first question, this is always a great one to get us started. For you youth rapid rehousing providers who have been doing it for a while, this is questions from folks who are just getting started. Can each of you talk about your one big lesson learned that you wish you had known at the beginning of your rapid rehousing for youth program? So we have, as Ann talked about, a lot of new funding out there for youth rapid rehousing, and lots of providers have reached out and said, hey, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. And that's kind of, you know, what this learning community grew out of. So we'll get started and let you all just kind of talk about the big thing. I know there are more than one, but like, what's your one big thing, to just kind of give you all a different opportunity to say something different? Your one big thing that you wish you knew and that you can tell new providers just getting started. Gabe, you're on my list at the top, so we'll start with you.
Okay, yeah. So one thing that I wish we knew when we started, we actually started our rapid housing program in August, so we're relatively new. But one thing that I wish we kind of really knew was just kind of like exactly what the housing market would kind of like look like, I think, after the inception of the program. A lot of things have kind of changed, especially like rental prices and so forth. Kind of the housing market just is a little different than normal. So I wish, you know, we could foresee that. It's a little bit hard. I don't have like a crystal ball to really see that. But also one good thing that we've been doing up in Seattle is we work in a collaborative with, it's 4 organizations providing rapid rehousing services to our young adult population in King County, and it's actually working out really well. We're working out collaboratively to each have a caseload and provide that support, the rental assistance, and we have a locator, housing locator on staff who's doing a great job in like locating spots for our young adults. We have about 53 people. So I would say, you know, definitely it was one of those things I think where I didn't see the, you know, potential like benefits of working in a collaborative and having the housing locator, but it's proven far beyond what I expected.
Great, thank you. And Gabe, I think that's kind of just talking about new knowledge that's developing so quickly with this model. I think even among non-youth rapid rehousing providers, there's still lots of really important lessons that are being learned, and I think everyone's kind of seeing that benefit of collaborating and having someone doing housing navigation. So thank you for sharing that. Next on my list is Barry, and for you guys, again, SPY, it has been doing this for just a little while now, but I think has some good lessons, particularly in Venice, which has a pretty large homeless youth population. Barry, did I unmute you?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I got you.
Okay, perfect. And you got my last name right. So I think one of the big things, and there is a large population of homeless youth in Venice, and it's a very, very quickly gentrifying high-income area of LA. And I think that one of the biggest things that I wish we knew at the very beginning was how to effectively message this to the youth. And I think one of the biggest things is, even though it's called rapid rehousing, it really isn't rapid because of the market that we're existing in. It kind of is fluctuating between a 2% and 2.7% vacancy rate in LA. So what we're seeing, what we're really coming up against is there's, you know, some really great funding for this program, but there just aren't any units available. So we've had some youth that have been on the list looking for housing since last August that still haven't found housing yet. So I think the biggest thing is just effectively communicating what the program is to the youth. And then it's not rapid.
Ideally, you get to rapid eventually. And there are some places that have gotten to under 30 days, and some SSVF providers actually on the vet side of it that are, I've heard of some that are doing it in 3 days, which blew my mind. But I really, particularly in LA, I think you guys are moving forward and have such a positive attitude about it, and have a few great landlords. I talked to one a couple weeks ago, and thinking about roommates, shared housing, all of that. I definitely think you'll be getting that number down and become more rapid. Thanks, Barry.
Oh, yeah, and we're getting more creative.
Go ahead. That's part of it. That's what I love about this model. It forces you to get creative and be flexible. Beth Holger-Ambrose from the link in Minneapolis. So happy to have you on the webinar.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and that the National Alliance is doing another learning community. I just wanted to say that I think we have 4 rapid rehousing programs at the link, and we started our first rapid rehousing program nearly 5 years ago, and we have learned a lot. And our rapid rehousing programs, like all of our housing programs and programs at the link, are co-designed and co-founded by youth with lived experience who are paid staff members here at the link. I mean, in connection with what Mindy was and Oliva was talking about earlier as a best practice. And one of the things, though, that we did not think about 5 years ago when we were first starting was to develop a policy around rehousing youth. So one of the things that we found, and this doesn't happen all the time with our young people in our housing program, but sometimes when the landlord is not exactly on the same page as Housing First as we might be, there might be a situation where a young person is asked to leave. And we have been very successful in being able to advocate with those market rate landlords to do what's called a mutual lease termination so that the young person does not have to have an eviction on their record, which is great. But then what our case managers and housing coordinators are tasked with is finding another unit for that young person by the time the landlord wants them to move out of the unit. And so that sometimes can be incredibly challenging. And sometimes we had to do that multiple times with a young person. So what we've had now is what we've basically learned is that we will rehouse a young person up to 3 times within our rapid rehousing programs. And then if that does not work, then we'll work on trying to work obviously now with our coordinated entry as well to get them a transfer into maybe a different program that might be more appropriate. Right. And this isn't definitely with the majority of the youth in our program, but it is a challenge that we faced that we weren't prepared for initially, and that we learned from throughout the years. So that's definitely one thing I wanted to bring forward.
That's great, and it sounds like it's kind of a form of progressive engagement. And since most young people do well and end up succeeding, and you can't tell going in who's going to be the one that does kind of blow out 3 times and needs something more intensive, right? Yeah.
Right, and oftentimes too, I just want to say there's situations such as domestic violence incidences or youth that are leaving gang activity that might have those former gang members or former partners that are coming into their buildings and causing disturbances too. So it's not always the young person themselves that are causing the landlord to want to terminate their lease. But yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Jody Jackson, Heartland Family Services. Big lesson learned.
Lessons learned. I think some of it just lots of little technical things. Like I wish we had maybe some tools or policies to look at, because I feel like we wasted a lot of time and maybe making things overly complicated. And then figuring out better.
No way, social workers don't do that.
Right. So I think, like somebody said, reaching out to other communities and building off of what other people have already learned. I wish we had done more of that. Also feel like we also started this program in one form of it, which we didn't call rapid rehousing then back in 2009. Things changed a lot. I think the other thing is really just about housing first and trauma informed. I think we really started this program before those models were really well developed or known or used much. So I feel like we are still making adjustments to try to continue to improve and be more in line with best practices. So I guess understanding how those principles actually play out into policies and what to do, like somebody said, when you're rehousing somebody or denials or different things like that. I wish we had had more examples of how to play that out in real life.
Great, thank you. And again, that's what we're hoping will come from this year's learning community. The feedback that we've gotten already, especially from you experienced rapid rehousing youth providers about what we could get out of this year's learning community, is actually developing a toolkit based on all of the trial and error that you all have gone through. So, so looking forward to working with you all to develop that. Let's see, next we have John Lawler from The Connection.
Oh, well, yeah, definitely second Beth's comments in terms of having really planning ahead for rehousing scenarios, because we hit that pretty early on in our program about 5 years ago when we first started. And also I'd say one thing with the time machine I go back and do is really the importance of educating other providers in the community about how to specifically work with young adults. We don't have a lot of young adult specific employment providers, mental health providers, substance abuse providers, et cetera. And so as we were making referrals to these, we found that youth really weren't engaging too much. And after listening to their feedback, it was because they were probably used to just working with 30, 40-year-old adults, et cetera. So since then, early on, we spent some time really trying to educate them about the young adult brain, what to expect. Don't schedule therapy appointments at 8 a.m. That's probably not the right time for someone in this age range. And with effort on that part, we've been able to establish a much better relationships and a much more kind of trustworthiness in terms of who we can send our youth to, because it really is important for them to be able to trust who you're going to send them to.
Yeah. I love that notion, and especially with, I think we all know that the way that we solve the problem in youth homelessness is this coordinated community response. And so it really is about connecting young people with other pieces of the system, but we do want to make sure that when they make those connections, they actually work for them. So I love the idea of each of the pieces within the system kind of educating the rest of the system about how things are different for young people. Let's see, Laura. So, Laura, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit about why we have LifeWorks on the panel, specifically in the 100-day challenge context? So you all kind of got thrown in the deep end of the pool, and but I think with that experience, you probably do have a couple of things you wish you had known at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the Director of Apartment-Based Living here at LifeWorks, and we are actually just in the process of rolling out a scattered site rapid as we close down a transitional supportive housing program. But we did learn a lot during the 100-day challenge. And I think, really kind of there's two things that stick out in my mind, and one is, again, the relationship. So if we had youth who, were engaged with our street outreach providers and then were pulled from the coordinated entry into a housing program that normally serves adults, there were a lot of issues with tracking the youth down, getting them to come to appointments, just because the trust wasn't there. And so I think we really learned that whoever, whether that's a street outreach provider or someone else, whoever the youth trusts and has that relationship already, really utilizing those existing relationships and natural supports for the soft handoff, and not just, kind of saying, okay, go to this housing provider now, we're done, but following them through if you already have the relationship so that they continue to feel supported. And then the other, I think, that was incredibly helpful was just the coordinated. We have a really amazing COC and two wonderful ladies who are really good at coordinating the landlord outreach piece and securing that stock of housing in a very challenging market. And then in addition to that, we have a risk mitigation fund that's a flexible pool of money to help, potentially reduce the cost of fair market units or cover potential damages and so forth. So that really increases buy-in from the landlord side.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. Thanks for again, jumping in the deep end of the pool, even with the Rapid Housing for Youth Learning community. We're glad to have you here. And let's close this question with Lynn Brockmeyer. And Lynn, help me get the name of your organization right, since I screw it up all the time.
No problem. Riverside University Health System, Behavioral Health.
There you go.
I think for us, for this question, one of the key things, I agree with what everyone else has said, but one of the things most recently that I've been recognizing, because this is a learning process, is that you have to recognize that youth are risk takers at heart, and that you use that to focus on positive risk-taking. So in creating a home and creating a support network for quality of life pieces, use risk-taking thought processes for employment and education, and also crisis planning around the negative results from other risk-taking behaviors that you didn't necessarily support, and how to plan development with action steps for the individual so that they have that crisis planning connected to that negative risk-taking. But also to recognize at the heart of this is that homelessness for a youth who's lived on the streets is not necessarily a risk to that youth. We may view that as risk-taking to live back on the streets, but for a lot of the youth that are coming from that, that's not something they would consider a risk. And so as you're planning and engaging and working and trying to do case management around that, you have to recognize that for them, I think. That's why they do fall back into the streets and lose their housing because of some of the other pieces. And then if you don't love finding strength in those most challenging individuals, if you're not really based and believe in the tenets of housing first or rapid rehousing, or believe that things can change for that youth, it's probably the wrong place for you, because it's hard work. And if you don't really love having that connection with the youth, it's going to be even more difficult for you to sustain that and to consider them your ally, and that, and as someone said earlier, that they're an asset to the program.
That's holding the hope, right, Lynn?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's what it's all about. You have to, they may not have hope that they can change things, that their life can ever be different, but you're the one responsible to help hold that hope for them. And if you don't believe they can do it, then how are you going to be able to do that for them?
Awesome. Thank you, Lynn. And we have tons and tons of questions. I'm going to try to get to as many as I can. I think one that you all know is something that everybody has a question about, so I'd love to just poll the group. Rental assistance amount. So one of the new providers in the community says that their COC is kind of married to only 70% rent assistance. And we do hear that individual communities will set really tight rules for how much assistance and when. And the Alliance would actually, I think, say that that's not a best practice, that you need to be flexible. So what I'd like to hear from all of you is just briefly kind of what your rental assistance structure looks like. I think I know for most of you kind of what that is, but I think it'll be really beneficial for the learning community to kind of hear about the differences among you and how you structure that. Again, let's just go down the list just for sake of ease on my end. Gabe?
Yeah, so with our rental structure, we provide all the moving costs for our participants, and that first month of rent is 100% paid for by our organization. And then after that, it really depends on the youth, depending on their income level. We definitely start working with them to see if they have income, and then we'll start kind of tearing back some of the assistance that we're providing. But at month 6, we are definitely kind of like at a set, I want to say it's about 30% of their rent is what they're going to be responsible, and we're responsible for the rest. And we tier it down even more within that first year until the very end when they're hopefully on their own. We only provide about 12 months of rental assistance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that seems to be, again, anecdotally, we haven't done like a formal survey of everybody, but 9 months to a year seems to be average. Barry, how about for SPY? You guys are just getting started, but what does your rental assistance structure look like now?
Yeah, so we are just getting started, and there's a couple different programs that are running rapid rehousing, and they might end up differing in the way that they approach it. But typically the way it works is for the first 3 months, 100% of the rent is paid. and then the next 3 months, 30% of their income goes to rent, and then it just kind of tears off to there. But it's based on their income rather than the cost of rent, with the goal of it eventually, I mean, it has to teeter off eventually. We haven't hit anyone that is completely off of rental assistance yet, but in terms of the length of time, it really is flexible. We have rental assistance coming through the single adult system as well as through the TAY, and the single adult generally lasts up to 12 months, where the TAY could last up to 24 months. But we do know that there is some flexibility in that as well. So as time goes on, we'll have a better idea of what it'll look like and what the most successful model is.
Great, and we will look forward to hearing about it. Beth, from the link, you guys have been doing this for quite a while now. What's your rental assistance model?
Sure. So our rental assistance model was actually designed by the youth and young families with lived experience who are on our advisory committees for our rapid rehousing programs that help design it. And what they have done is they have set a policy of paying 30% of their income for rent. And the reason that they wanted it set this way is to really help them transition into more of a stability. As we all know, young people who are experiencing homelessness are trying to go to school as well as work, and so they oftentimes may not be able to work a full 40-hour week if they're trying to go to a vocational or post-secondary or college degree education, or finish high school for that matter. Also with our young families, they're also trying to parent in addition to that. And so what we found that works really well is that we partner with, we've created a partnership with Goodwill Easter Seals, which is a local youth employment provider that will have a dedicated youth employment specialist with us. So once the youth is safely housed, we can really help them in increasing their income, but being able to pay 30% of their income and keep, the majority of it really helps them with all of the struggles that they have to get financially secure and frankly transition out of our program more quickly. And then what we do is per HUD standards, of course, we reevaluate their income every quarter and we make rental adjustments based on that. And thankfully, through much of our, thanks to HUD and Oliva and everybody at HUD and our local continuum of cares, we've been able to have support from rental assistance to be able to do this.
Awesome. Jody, how about at Heartland Family Services, your rental assistance model?
Yeah, so we do deposit, and we pay the first month in full for everyone, so they don't have to have any money together at the time they're signing their lease, so that's not a barrier to them moving in. And then after that, it's also income-based, so they pay 30% of their income towards their housing costs, and we consider utilities in that. So if their utilities aren't included, then we take the utility allowance off the amount they pay. And the length of assistance is just month to month, so it depends on the individual and their needs. But generally, our length of stay is about 4 or 5 months. We go up to 12. We can extend beyond 12, although we rarely have.
Great, thank you. And John, the model for the connection?
Yeah, sure. We use our rental portions are based entirely on the total cost of the rent. Usually the first couple months there's no fee at all, but the percentage that the youth would pay gradually increases over time for that. And there's what I kind of say is the appearance of a pretty firm structure around that, but with a lot of flexibility built in. We kind of want to sensitize them to the financial responsibility, but we know in advance that we're probably going to have to bail them out at certain points depending on where they are in terms of their motivation and then just their income level. So we do a good fair number of bailouts. We also put in a lot of incentives that lets us adjust their rental portion. So for youth who choose to go back to school or engage in school, we have the flexibility where we get to peel way back on their rental portion to the point where they might not be paying a portion at all when they should be paying a 30% or 50%, et cetera. So really pretty flexible. We utilize it very case by case, but very pretty craftfully as well, just to help them progress towards that independence. And we're a little unique in that we can go up to 2 years with our assistance. We very rarely go that far. I think we average right around a year right now. But we do have that flexibility for youth that can progress even within that one year time frame.
Awesome, thank you. Julie, did you talk about this in your presentation? If not, just quickly for us again, what your rental assistance structure is like.
Well, we have evolved. We used to be very strictly 100% 75, 50, 25, and we would back ourselves out. We still, in theory, do that most of the time. It's certainly not on a quarter. But what we've started instituting is if young people are coming into the program and they in fact do have income, I think we're running about 25% we're asking them to put forward towards their housing costs, which is actually not real, because then we put it in a account and we pay it out when they leave the program. Wow. What I think is really interesting and that I think is really important for us is we sort of hit at about the 6th month, 7th month time in the program. If they haven't sort of stabilized quickly and moved on, 6 and 7 months is really when the Fisher cut bait kind of happens. And we start to understand the effects of trauma and mental health and addiction. And that's when we start deciding, oh, maybe this person really needs to be in permanent supported housing. So we start really assessing. And I wanted to bring that up because I think it's really important. Young people have emergent mental health and you never quite know what's going on. So you have to sort of understand sort of what that rhythm is of their involvement with you and kind of understand if they're actually in the right program. Maybe they got into a program and they have some stability, and then once they have the stability, all the other stuff starts popping up. And I think that a really good and important takeaway is sort of what is the rhythm of your program and when do you need to start doing those types of assessments. It's really essential.
Great point. Thanks, Julie. Laura, again, you guys have just gotten started, but have you set up a model for what your rental assistance is going to look like?
We haven't actually finalized that. We will definitely be paying 100% of move-in costs and deposit, so the first month will be covered for sure, but it'll be assessed. We can pay 100% rent and utility assistance for up to 12 months, but it'll be very individualized. So offering intensive case management support twice per week, obviously that's voluntary, but ideally the relationship be there so that the case managers are really aware of what's going on with the youth and their ability to pay a portion or all of the rent.
Great, thanks, Laura. And Lynn, how about for Riverside's rental structure?
Well, we have evolved as well. So here's what we're doing currently that kind of takes all of what we've learned into place, is that we do the first 90 days or 3 months of full support, so full move-in, full rental assistance, to allow them an opportunity to address that initial shift from a crisis mode to a more stable living environment. And then every 90 days after that, we look at where they're at, and we have a period of review, so that we begin to look at what their needs are, what their income is, and for example, we typically shift then after 90 days to 30% of income. So they would pay a 30% share, very similar to permanent supportive housing. And we believe that helps them develop home skills and budget skills while they're in case management, so it allows us that opportunity to educate. We can also, though, if they're beginning to pay their own utilities, because we've been paying it because they have no income, and once they start paying their own utilities, we might allow them another 90 days to get used to paying all the utilities and then shift to including the rent. But it's really based on that reevaluation, and we do it from a perspective of what are their needs, and we have them request an extension with a justification so that we're educating them on what their needs are. But it also allows re-engagement with their case management team if they haven't had good engagement with them. And it allows us an opportunity to develop those self-advocacy skills and have choice in the midst of that. And for us, the funding, depending on which funding source we're using for which individual, it can go up to 18 months.
Great, thanks, Lynn. A lot of what you said made me, and what some of the other providers just said, made me think about the implication here of doing progressive engagement, and I think that that's something we don't have time to talk about today, but it's probably something that we'll want to focus on and dive into in future learning community meetings. And I will say too, to get to the questioner's point about, you know, the COC has very one of the providers who wasn't able to join us today, Beth Fetzer-Rice, formerly with Salvation Army of Central Ohio, you know, some of doing rapid rehousing for youth involves advocating with your COC about, like, listen, there are some ways that young people will be different in this model. It definitely can work for young people, but there are tweaks that have to be made, and it shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all. And one of the places where young people are different, seem to be different as a group, is that the assistance needs to go longer. That doesn't mean that you don't revisit every 3 months, or that you can't structure, you know, a sliding scale, but just being flexible. And I think what I've heard all of you say for both of these questions throughout the presentations, even Ann was talking about it, and this is what I love about rapid rehousing. Everyone's talking about flexibility, being able to tailor to the young person, letting the young person lead the way, which is what really inspires me about it. And also evolving, and that's part of the provider being flexible for themselves too. So thank you all for that question. I'm going to another question that's popping up a lot for people, and again, you won't be surprised about this. And Ann alluded to it, landlord engagement, giving landlords incentives. I don't know if we'll have time to go down the whole list, so if any of you want to pipe up about things that you do for landlord engagement, special issues around landlord engagement with young people that you've learned about, incentives that you've found helpful to get landlords to rent to young people. And I will say this is one of those issues that I think we're going to dive deeper into, maybe have an entire online meeting focused just on landlord engagement, and maybe actually hearing from some landlords about it. But if any of you want to pop up with some good ideas about landlord engagement and incentives for landlords.
We actually have a program where we have housing resource specialist teams, and their real role is to be case managers for the landlords, so to speak. So we educate them, we develop that relationship with them. Their whole focus is to check in with them regularly, whether we have someone in their complex or not, to support them. Then we also have a 24-hour call-in number that they can call to and can connect directly with the housing resource specialist if there's a problem on site. And then so that resource specialist can work with the landlord around what the problem is, and then also connect to, if that individual is connected to one of our clinics, to that clinic caseworker as well. We also have a couple of college communities in our county. So we found that for the youth, if we can integrate them into some of the college-oriented landlords, meaning landlords who have complexes around the colleges, they don't have a problem with the youth because that's who they're serving. And so that provides some opportunity there.
That's a great idea. How about the rest of you, experienced provider panelists? Any good ideas about landlord engagement and incentives?
Hi, this is Julie. We actually, with the advent of our Housing First supported housing piece of our supported housing, we actually had landlord recruitment and education sessions. So we literally invited them, and we used our social network of internally and externally through homeless service providers, and we got probably about 30 providers in the room, and then I think we had about 15 landlords in the room the first time we did it. And we just had coffee and donuts, and then we said, this is what our program is. This is how we work with our young people. And it was just an education session and a discussion, and that has really proved beneficial, and it's so opposite of our initial and still used strategy in Q-BLOK, where we work with one large landlord who really gets us. So I was really surprised last fall that was so successful, and those relationships continue to build, and then we're moving into then developing deep and meaningful relationships. But we use this really large net approach to get them recruited, and I was amazed, but it was really helpful.
That's great to hear. You guys had one of the what I called the unicorn landlords, your Q-BLOK landlord. So it's good to hear that you're moving into more than just your unicorn. The unicorn is awesome, but
we're turning others into unicorns.
Yay! How about for the rest of you experienced providers, any good advice on landlord engagement?
This is Jody.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. This is Jody. I guess I was just going to weigh in. We've been struggling with that and have done a change project over the last year. So we use a model called NIATEC. If anybody's familiar with that, where you basically, it's very data heavy, and you do one change at a time and you measure the effectiveness. So we've been working on recruiting landlords who are willing to take our higher need, higher barrier clients.
Right.
And from what we've done kind of so far, it's probably not the most popular answer, but we've tried different incentives, like financial incentives, like paying last month up front, and that'll recruit a couple people, but they're just not as effective when you look at the data as you think it would be. The most effective thing we've done is build relationships, have lots of one-on-one meetings, be very particular. It's a lot of work and FaceTime. But when you're looking at recruiting landlords, I don't know what the right intervention is, but the more you can focus on relationship building, mediation, spending a lot of one-on-one time getting to know what they're looking for, that's been more effective than kind of throwing money at the problem and paying damages. Or so for what that's worth.
I think that's a really profound lesson, and it's probably also true for a lot of other relationships that we have in our lives. FaceTime is great. Who else is going to pipe in?
I guess I can speak on our part.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say one thing that we use in our sales pitch to landlords is actually giving them some of the data and outcomes of our program that they'd be interested in. So I think we've had like one actual eviction out of 200 something served. I think we're roughly usually fall around the 86% employment rate. So those kind of things tend to belabor some of the concerns that they have about the age population, and just seeing that it's not necessarily the image that they might have in their head. For the most part, the program does work, and it helps get them connected to sources that are not going to make them a problem tenant, but also are going to result in them being able to pay. And I know we also eventually switched to really only targeting larger landlords, even though it's a lower percentage in terms of our success rate on a sales pitch. When you get one, you can get 20 units of options in there. So that was a helpful part for us as well.
Great point. And I'll give the final to whoever was trying to pipe in there.
Hey, this is Beth from Minneapolis. Sorry, I'll try to be fast.
Yes.
So
go ahead.
I think the thing that's been the most helpful for us is another thing that we learned was that the case management and youth work skills are very different than working with landlords. And so we developed two specialized positions, which I'm sure many of you have heard about and might even do at your own agencies. So we have specialized housing coordinators who only work with the landlords and only do housing search process. And then they also help mitigate ongoing any concerns landlords might have and are kind of like our landlord relationship managers even after the youth moves into the program. So they're above and beyond our case managers, which just work on focusing with the youth and developing an individualized youth goal plan that's driven by the young person, of course, and helping support them through their transition out of homelessness into housing stability. So creating a specialized position just to work with landlords has helped a lot. Yeah. And then the other thing that one of our staff thought of was to because young people actually know a lot of landlords too, and so we have youth, an incentive for youth that if they recruit a new landlord for us, a young person experiencing homelessness in our programs, then we give them an additional $50 Target gift card. And so that's actually worked to bring in some landlords because youth are really the best outreach and sellers of the program a lot of times. And then last but not least, we have a couple of members on our board of directors who are in the real estate business. And so they have been able to help us secure landlords through their network. So that's been really helpful. So having those types of real estate or property owners on your boards also is helpful.
Those are all great tips. Thanks so much, everybody. And I have so many more great questions. For those of you who had questions that I wasn't able to get to, there are a lot of them. We're going to kind of gather those together and try to get them answered and maybe be able to send those out to you. But we do have to end the webinar now. So just next steps for the 2017 Learning Community, we are looking to have 6 months of online meetings with focuses on very deep dives into kind of specific topics that are really important for this model, and some of them we've already heard about: landlord engagement, what does rental assistance look like, and lots of other questions that have been surfaced. We'll have a presentation from an experienced provider, maybe bring in some other experts on specific topics, and then really open it up to this kind of open Q&A with the experienced providers. And of course, ultimately, we want participants to be able to integrate all of these practices and lessons learned into their own rapid approach. I will take just a second. We are in a very special time politically right now, as you all probably are aware. And just throw in a little advocacy push there. The Alliance is doing some advocacy around right now the FY 2017 appropriations. Congress is on recess until April 24th, but we've got to get that legislation passed by April 28th to avoid a shutdown, which would be disastrous for vulnerable people like those we serve. So there are lots of actions you can take and connect to via this link on the Alliance website to do a really easy advocacy tool that our advocacy team has come up with. So just wanted to throw that in there. And again, oops, back. Yeah, there. Any questions about the Rapid Housing for Youth Learning Community, get in touch with me or Jen. Next time I will be doing it from the office, not my apartment, and have even more cat pictures. We'll be sending out surveys to get your input about what you want to learn most about over the coming 6 months, and newsletters recapping all the information, and so much more awesome to come. Thanks everybody for participating, and I will talk to you all again soon.
Thank you. Thanks, bye.